Welcome to the Turndown. We often talk about rate changes, dashboards, and distribution strategy, but today we're cutting through the noise to talk about something more fundamental: relevance. My guest is Ali Northfield, the powerhouse managing director of Revenue by Design and the visionary behind the Global Revenue Forum. Ali works with hundreds of properties to sharpen commercial strategy, but she's not here to talk about business as usual. We're tackling the uncomfortable questions. How do you drive profitability when booking patterns are fractured and guests are more hesitant than ever? As AI reshapes how the world searches for travel, are we prepared? Ali argues that the next generation of revenue leadership requires a radical shift. We need to be more commercial, more communicative, and closer to the guest than ever before. We dive into the future of demand, the real cost of acquisition, and why the hospitality industry must rethink how it sells itself, not just to guests, but to the next generation of talent. This is a masterclass in modern commercial leadership. Let's get into it. Ali, it's a pleasure to have you on the Turndown. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
My opening question for anyone joining the program is typically, what keeps you up at night these days, or right now, Ali? What comes to mind?
So I think the main thing is just staying relevant in the bigger picture. In the shorter term, it would be remiss not to say that we are all dealing with a significant level of uncertainty. So I think those are the two things right now that are right top of my agenda for 3 o'clock in the morning.
And uncertainty, is this travel outlook? Is like, what is it? The oil prices? Like, where is your head going at 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I think what's different about this level of uncertainty and the fact that it is geopolitically motivated is really trying to understand what consumers will do with travel. Do I advise my clients in the UK, that's great, everybody's going to stay at home, so it's going to be a fab summer, or is everybody going to stop traveling anyway because nobody's got any money left? These are the kind of things. There are certain things which feel like they're difficult to interpret right now.
Okay, so you're in this period of uncertainty because you don't know yet. Like,
Yeah.
we are roughly, spring of 2026.
hmm
This is peak booking season for the summer right now, or it's about to start.
It is. I mean, depending on the type of asset that you're talking about, but typically, yes. I mean, people are starting to make holiday plans. Um, and if I was being fair, I'd say that we're looking at um, a level of kind of like uncertainty in booking patterns as well, that people are slightly hesitant, perhaps sort of holding back a little bit just to try and make sure that they make the right decisions about what to do. So, yeah. And I tell you though, there's another thing actually. There's another thing that's
Go,
interesting
go.
for the UK traveller, because now Europe has introduced this new fingerprint system. Sorry, this is going to be really timely, isn't it? This is like really
Perfect.
2026.
Yeah.
So now people are really dreading kind of like the 2 hour waits in queues whilst they get their fingerprints taken, and they go through this new way of regulating the fact that from the UK we can only spend 90 days in Europe at any one particular time. So yeah. So
Interesting, interesting. The 90, so
yeah.
I didn't think you were going to mention the 90 days. The fingerprint and etc. I witnessed this myself, I think about a week
hmm
ago when I was in
Yeah.
Europe. And it was okay. Granted, I connected via Munich on my way to where did I go? Sofia, Bulgaria.
Okay.
And it went extremely smooth there. There was no wait times, but
hmm
yeah,
We'll see.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, for people who don't know Ali, what do you do, Ali?
So I am the managing director of Revenue by Design, and Revenue by Design provides hotel clients with fully managed outsourced services as a primary function. So revenue management outsource. And we have two other revenue streams that we work on. One is we also provide online training in the form of a qualification for anybody who wants to be more relevant within the space and be more confident in communicating their skills in revenue management. And then finally, we also run the London version of the Global Revenue Forum, which is a big conference that's held from our side. It's held in January, in London, Milan, and Stockholm on the same day. And the aim of Global Revenue Forum is to bring together the revenue management community. So that's what Revenue by Design does. So.
That's amazing. You're wearing so many hats, and I could go in so many places right now. Describe your typical customer, if you will. So you're providing revenue management services to hotels that don't have a revenue management team. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a decent
Yeah.
description? What do the hotels look like, or what's sort of the typical hotel?
A typical hotel for us would be sort of 80 to 120 rooms, not necessarily super large, um, that that realizes that it's more efficient to outsource the revenue function, because you get a fully qualified revenue manager at at an efficient pricing point. That said, we do actually operate hotels with more than 1,000 rooms at times. It really depends on what the client needs at any one particular time. So we do scan right the way across the board, but typically the sweet spot would be between 80 and 120 rooms.
That's amazing. It hasn't always been like this, right? Like revenue management is still a fairly new, I guess, practice in hotels, right?
Yeah.
You always used to have reservation managers, or you used to have sales teams, etc. How did you
Mhm.
get started in revenue management, Ali?
Um, I was working in distribution and e-commerce before, so this is like a long time ago. I mean, like
That's
last
okay.
century,
That's
almost.
okay.
So
Last century. Come on.
yeah. So and so working in distribution and sort of like the emergence of the power of online travel agents, it became quite clear that actually to be able to distribute effectively, there needed to be some level of pricing strategy and some thought process behind that distribution strategy. And revenue management really was just emerging in terms of it being mainstream hotel. And also it was emerging in terms of the technology supporting that decision making as well. So that's kind of how I got into it, very early days. And with Revenue by Design, I jumped in with a colleague, and we just started saying that we did revenue management, and then we got some clients. It was great fun. It was a lot of fun. But that's how the company really started.
For someone who's not familiar with revenue management, how would you describe revenue management? Like, let's say somebody that is new to the industry or wants to get into the industry and is thinking, oh, this could be, something for me. How would you describe revenue management in hotels?
For me, it's a series of business processes that you put in place which are related to market segmentation, the ideal customer, demand management, and pricing. So, and beneath all of those elements, quite a few business processes that when combined, actually work together to optimize the demand for a particular property at a specific price point. So the challenge that I find in terms of people's interpretation of revenue management is that they think it's, oh, heaven forbid, tweaking the pricing, which it's really not what revenue management is about at all. I mean, it is really about getting being extremely efficient about the relevant business processes that need to be in place, which in turn, when done really well, will provide the hotel with huge opportunity and to avoid them leaving money on the table. So
So it's not only setting the prices, it's not going up and down the prices, it's business
no.
processes. It is.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's for example having a hugely efficient reservations department that makes sure that every single reservation is entered into your property management system really cleanly. That customer is segmented, so you have an element of market segmentation. And when you have that, you can then direct pricing, differential pricing towards different market segments. That then starts to segment your market, which allows you to effectively differential pricing is providing different price parameters for the same product. So selling a room at different prices to different segments at different times. And then understanding the market demand, the booking windows of each of those segments, and then fundamentally then forecasting that demand and ideally then applying a price to that forecast. So the pricing really is almost like the end game once all of the other elements are stacked up.
Interesting. So the pricing naturally happens from your perspective?
There's the economics of pricing, which
Sure.
indicate that there's going to be a price point at which customers are willing to pay.
Hmm.
Um, there's also going to be a requirement of the asset to drive a certain price because they need to make a certain amount of money.
Sure.
Um, and then there's also demand factors. So pricing isn't the last point, but I think it's probably a conclusion based on all of the other elements that you've put together in terms of the initial research, in terms of that pricing strategy, which of course is going to change. The pricing is going to change. The strategy doesn't necessarily need to change that much, but certainly, yeah, you've got to have that ability to understand so much about your market, the type of guest that's going to book, why, when, and at what point, and in which mode that guest is. I can be a different type of guest depending on what my needs are at any one particular time, whether it's for a business trip, a leisure trip, just going out for a party, those kind of things. So, yeah.
A lot of revenue management systems out there exist, right? I mean, there's probably hundreds of revenue management systems that claim that they can potentially replace the revenue manager on property. What do you say to that claim? Possible? Not possible?
Um, I think that we are moving in a direction where revenue management systems can create significant efficiencies in terms of the data analysis that's required. You're seeing now a lot of revenue management systems proposing that agentic AI can produce scenarios whereby you have specific solutions that you can follow based on the data that they have. And I'm seeing as well demands from owners, the asset management community to drive those efficiencies through technology and automation. So, for example, a lot of at that community level, you'll have people asking questions like how many hotels can a revenue manager run at any one
For
time,
sure.
and that has changed like a significant amount in the last 5 years. So previously it would, I don't know, if you first looked at some of the brands managing revenue management, then it might be like 3 hotels, and then it was 5, and it was 7. Now it's not unusual for a revenue manager to be managing like 10 hotels, 15 hotels. Again, whether or not that level of detail that you might want is going to be there if you're managing 15 hotels, it would mean that the technology has to be super efficient to
Hmm.
basically help on that level. So I think the efficiencies in data management, but I think also that at the end of the day, you still need a human at the end of that line to effectively analyze what makes sense, redirect that technology. If you know something that the technology doesn't, then clearly, you still need that human in the loop.
Yeah. And then there are events, like COVID, where suddenly 50 or 60 or 70% of your on the books reservations are
Hmm.
canceled, and you
Yeah.
don't really have a scenario, or you don't have a historic component to that.
Hmm.
You almost need the human person.
You almost do. I think one of the things that which is quite interesting that has come out of things like COVID and the sort of rapidly changing marketplaces over quite a sustained period of time. It's quite difficult to remember now, but certainly in the UK, we had scenarios where different geographies were able to travel and other ones weren't. So you'd be in one region and you had to stay at home, and you could be 10 miles down the road and you could travel. And so revenue management systems had to had to had to learn to respond to that. And I have to say that there have been some success stories out of that. That relying significantly on past history is not necessarily the holy grail of a revenue management system anymore. Whereas it was previously, there was a lot of business rules and small algorithms that were built into revenue management systems, which very much relied on kind of like how did last Tuesday behave in comparison to a Tuesday of last year, which had similar demand characteristics. So there's significantly less reliance on that kind of data now, because in reality, we live in a world that is changing significantly more quickly, irrespective of pandemics. There are other things that happen which mean that we have to pivot quite frequently on the strategies and the expectations and forecasts that we had.
Hmm. So less reliance on historic data, more reliance
Hmm.
on what? Like what is replacing the historic data, if you will?
but the ability to evaluate what's actually happening right now, sort of the pace of demand changes, reservations pick up, that type of thing. So really looking at exactly what's happening within a window, and then creating scenarios that make sense based on the demand patterns that are coming in. So pretty much sort of working at the front of the curve rather than the back end of the curve. So the curve is still there in terms of the reservation space of arrival, demand patterns, maybe looking for similarities in demand patterns that perhaps we couldn't see previously. So just the way customers are behaving, the fact that lead times are changing quite significantly, irrespective of the segment you're talking to. So this type of thing, I think, systems are better able to manage because they're more powerful. They can chunk a lot more data more quickly than they could before.
You mentioned lead times, right? So lead time is the time between booking and arrival,
Hmm.
if you will. You seeing significant changes in lead time in all directions, or what do you see happening most of the time? Is it a shortening of lead time? Is it what's happening?
Typically, we are seeing a shortening of lead times, definitely. Although you'll always find somebody that can come and give you some data that shows, wow, lead times are getting longer and longer, and so there's loads more time to prepare.
Hmm.
But in reality, I think consumers in general are understanding that perhaps the old rules of deeper discounting towards the day of arrival are not quite so drastic, and so therefore they don't necessarily have to manage when they make a booking, but they can actually manage when they make a booking based on their own requirements, rather than being driven by the industry to book early and save, or um, the typical tour operator model, which was very much sort of dumping inventory just as the day of arrival approached. So it was quite confusing for guests at any one particular time. So you kind of like you couldn't win whichever way you went. I think those kind of like scenarios are changing. But certainly, and also I think that people are more impulsive than they used to be, and
Yeah,
making decisions to last minute decisions to take their travel time.
travel is such an interesting industry because we're all travelers ourselves, right? In a way, so we all
Yeah.
have an opinion that is both, supplier oriented or the hotelier oriented, but also the traveler oriented. Um, One scenario that I struggle with myself as a traveler is I would book far in advance, meaning I would be happy to pay to book now for my next trip in June, in July, and September. But oftentimes I'm not doing it because I'm not confident whether I'm actually traveling for those specific days. And
Hmm.
cancel policies have become extremely unflexible from a consumer perspective. Right? There's a lot of non-refundable products out there. There's a lot of, cancel policies that are, at least in some, destinations, not very consumer
Hmm.
friendly. And, we all have limited travel budgets as well. So I often end up booking 2 weeks before I travel to avoid change fees, cancel fees, etc., because they
Yeah.
can they can happen quite often. What do you say to that? Like, have we lost a little bit I guess, the ability to be consumer centric, or do you consult your properties and always having flexibility as well alongside deeper discount and non-refundable rates? Like, what's the best practice here?
I'm reminded of a situation that we have at the moment in terms of current sort of client base. One client is servicing what we would call the uber high net worth individual.
Hmm.
So very, very, very high end product. And on that basis, and it's also quite a unique experience. And on that basis, people are prepared to pay upfront,
Hmm.
and also it protects, from the client perspective, it does protect the revenue that there's certainly a significant percentage of that stay is paid for upfront. For other hotels and other clients of ours that participate in a more competitive environment, then it is more competitive to offer more flexibility to the guest, and to follow, certainly from an OTA perspective, to follow their directives, which is typically, if you have flexible cancellation policies, then algorithms are more positively orientated towards those particular properties. So it's very much horses for courses, I think, at the moment, and the strategy has to reflect that. We have one client that sits in the middle at the moment, and they have a fully prepaid strategy, and it's very challenging. It acts as a restriction. That is a restriction we use in revenue management. If you want to calm down a booking curve, like the rate of reservations arrival because it's going too hot,
Mhm.
then you put in a restriction, which is like, okay, prepaid bookings only, or length of stay restrictions, and that'll shut it down for you. That will put the water on the fire.
Mhm.
So it's and it becomes very complex when if you get those wires crossed and don't understand exactly what you're doing and what that pricing strategy is doing in terms of how it's impacting customer behavior and customer decision making. It's also, you have to think about the customer. If they're putting that money down up front, they have to find that money before they travel, and often in our heads psychologically we're going to get the money when we travel, not before. So
Yeah.
unless you're really good at budgeting, which I'm not. So
Who
I
is?
never have the money.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, what's the biggest? I mean, you talk to hoteliers all day long. What's the biggest pressure hitting hotel margins right now?
I think the one that is pretty common across the entire industry is cost of employment, um, the cost of people, and certainly, I'm talking to the UK market, which is where I'm at mainly. We have cost of employment as an issue, and we have then that's reflected in increased taxes, in an increase in the lowest wage or the lower wage brackets. So it is very challenging. And also we have cost of energy and cost of food. So actually everywhere, it's just hitting the middle of the P&L. So it's not just people; it's very much just the operating environment as well, which is quite challenging. I'm seeing, for example, for the first time, rather than revenue directors and commercial directors being charged with KPI driven targets, so monetary or numerically driven targets like RevPAR or
Mhm.
average daily rate, they're now being driven by targets such as how do I well, not how do I, but you must keep down the cost of recruitment, or you must keep your team stable. These are some of the KPIs that they've now got, which is stability of teams, growing from within, reducing the cost of employment. So those are huge changes, sea changes in the targets for the commercial entities within hospitality at the moment.
You mentioned commercial roles, which I find fascinating because I do see that popping up much more frequently. I mean, we started the conversation talking about revenue management, but what we're also seeing in hospitality is the sort of onset of, you know, I'm a commercial leader, I'm a chief commercial officer or of sorts, encompassing the disciplines of revenue management, sales and marketing, reservation management,
Hmm.
distribution into a single, I guess, discipline, if you will. Is that the future of revenue management, that it's becoming a commercial role that encompasses more than just revenue management?
I think so. Yeah, I think certainly for hotels to benefit from the level of understanding that the revenue function has, then driving that role into a commercial direction makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, I think also we need to consider the efficiencies that an asset can bring when removing the silos of marketing and sales and distribution, and the commercial function and a commercial leader will bring that all together. And I see that happening more and more. And certainly I see it practically with Global Revenue Forum, where we had people that were speaking as revenue managers like 4 years ago, and they're now commercial directors. It's a very common route for them to go, which is great. I'm very pleased and proud of all of them that have gone that
Hmm.
far, which is great.
So what? what competencies do they need? Like if you're a revenue manager today and you want to become a commercial director or a commercial leader of sorts, what's the area that they lack most? Sorry, that sounds terrible. What where is the opportunity
Yeah,
for
I'm
growth?
loving the answer to that one.
Where is the opportunity for growth? Right, much
I
nicer put.
think, yeah, um, I think, I think, the opportunity to grow for revenue managers is really moving beyond understanding the numbers, which a revenue manager typically is really familiar with the numbers. It's
Mhm,
then repurposing those numbers in a way that services the the language that's used by an asset manager, or the
mhm,
language that's used by a marketing director, or the language that's used by a reservations manager. And I
mhm,
think it's having that confidence in the numbers means that a revenue manager specifically can grow their, what do you call it, emotional intelligence. I don't know, their ability to reinterpret those numbers in a way that satisfies these different target audiences. Um, and that's a real skill, to be able to communicate something meaningful at those different levels. So working up and down, if you want to put it that way, or across the organization. And I think that's an area where a revenue manager can really focus on their skills. Some revenue managers, they're just happy where they are. It's not,
mhm.
you don't have to go in that direction. And there's some people that absolutely love just being with the numbers, um, and understanding how an asset performs, and just really getting out the best out of it. If you want to grow, then I think that having those skills is super helpful. Strategic skills as well. That kind of like goes hand in hand.
Interesting. Interesting. So be the analyst, but be an extremely good communicator because
Hmm.
you have to convince a lot more teams about your strategy, about what's happening and where you're going with it. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's a fair assumption. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk some more about sort of the future of travel search. You're organizing the Global Revenue Forum. I'm sure you talk a lot of agentic AI. But before we go there, um, quick, quick fire questions, right? So say anything that comes to mind, and then we talk about agentic AI. What's one metric you think is being overvalued right now?
Oh, I would say RevPAR. It just makes me uncomfortable.
It's
I feel
dead.
like I'm 80.
Okay.
I
All right.
feel really old when I even say it.
Gut instinct or AI recommendation? Who gets the final say in pricing?
Right now, with the quality of AI analysis, I'd say gut instinct.
Okay.
But ask me again in a year's time.
A modern revenue manager is more a strategist or analyst, which matters more right now?
Strategist.
Perfect distribution mix or maximum direct bookings? What's the real goal?
Perfect distribution mix.
Okay. And I have to go back to RevPAR. What's the most important metric?
Oh, I would say understanding cost of acquisition.
Okay. Okay. For every reservation, I assume sort of the cost of acquisition of a guest.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. For every segment, certainly. Yeah.
At your recent Global Revenue Forum, you had a significant discussion about AI search tools and how they're
Hmm.
shifting consumer habits away from, the typical transactional queries. With this shift in mind, how crucial is it for hotels to develop context relevant content? I guess because you're answering a bot, a large language model, right? Like
Yeah.
what do you recommend your hotels or your customers to do right now?
I reckon hotels really need to have an understanding of why a customer might book and under what circumstances, and create content that's likely to effectively create the largest FAQ that you've ever seen, because it's kind of like, what would I do under these circumstances? And the answers have to be somewhere in your content. So So if it's somebody asking about um, how long they can stay, can they bring the dog, do they have do you have a high chair for my 2-year-old? All of that data needs to be then, an AI bot needs to be able to assimilate that data and from a specific property and feed it back to you. And that's a very simple example, but typically the extremely long search terms are being used by guests nowadays and put into AI large language models and expecting a result, and it does offer hotels an opportunity to really sell themselves based on the level of service and experience that a guest is looking for. And I think the concept of experiences now is huge, and delivering on guest experiences is something that that you can only really do if you have the right level of content there. So hugely important.
So concretely, you're asking hoteliers to publish 1,000 FAQs on their website, right? Like, come up with any possible questions your guests may have, because they will ask the AI agent, the large language model, whether they can have a soft-boiled egg inside their hotel room.
Yes, obviously it doesn't have to be an FAQ.
Okay, but that's the question that needs answering, I guess, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's also providing information on the experiences that you can have locally. It's having really nice like blogs or use cases of kind of like what customers have experienced at your property. So it's really repackaging content in different ways as well. Although actually a straightforward, can I do this at your property is and answering that question is also going to solve a lot of the
Mhm.
problems. But I've seen. I mean, there are lots of different ways that hotels can answer those, can solve those things. The content challenge in nice ways, really nice designer-led ways, which helps solve the AI bot question.
But the risk is, as a hotelier, is that if I don't have the answer prepared, I won't show up to the, guest, right? I just will disappear from their perspective of view, right?
Hmm.
And while previously I may have gotten a phone call from a guest say, "Hey, do you accept dogs?" That phone call no longer happens, right? You're not getting that interaction with that prospect guest.
Hmm.
What happens is that prospect guest uses ChatGPT, or replace it by any large language model, ask the question, and if the property hasn't provided, to your point, that content in their website somewhere, the hotel won't show up in the search result. Is that fair?
Yes and no. I mean, certainly it's not as black and white as that. So
Okay.
certainly, if you had 80% of what a customer is looking for, you would still show.
Okay.
But there would be a rider on that result saying, "I've managed to find you this, but you can't
Uh-huh.
get that. You can't get the last 2 items on your shopping list." So, but it wouldn't be a straight never to be shown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, are pictures becoming less important in this context?
Um, Perhaps in the short term, but not in the long term. No, I think lots of it'll be multimedia searches will become the norm, but right now perhaps not so much. Um, a lot of it's sort of like text led, but
Okay.
still in future definitely.
In your quickfire answer, we talked about direct bookings versus perfect distribution max.
Mm.
We have to talk about OTAs a little bit, right? What's your fundamental approach to using OTAs for distribution? Friend or foe?
Both. I
Both.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, you can. I think. Okay, so if you were to look at your property and you always had a percentage of occupancy that consistently year round was not being used. So you had like
Yeah.
a gap between 100% and 80, let's say.
Alan?
And if you weren't using OTAs, then you should, because they will fill that gap.
Mhm.
Um, if you are a property that you and not very well known, then I think you should look at OTAs for just general breadth of distribution and promotion. Um, they so because they do reach like customers that you just won't. So it's a really solid marketing tool to use. However, if you then get very lazy and you you basically only use online travel agents, then I think then you will become trapped in that OTA environment, and you will be susceptible to the algorithms that are being used to present your property, and sometimes they don't work for you, and that becomes then all of your eggs are in one basket, and that becomes a very dangerous place to be in. So it is really like it isn't necessarily walking the middle road, because that sounds like a bit of a sort of like a bit of a kind of
Mm-hmm.
sort of situation, but so, and nobody wants
Mm-hmm.
so but I think definitely you still want to have that direct connection with the customer. So there is a direct strategy that should be taken, definitely. But I think we need to be realistic in terms of the breadth of awareness that online travel agents can generate, and in that case, supply you with bookings ideally that you would not have otherwise got.
Yeah. You said something very interesting that made me pause, and I was like, okay, I need to double click on that. When you start being lazy as a hotelier, is what you said, right? And
Yeah.
being lazy typically means you stop doing something, right? Like, what do you stop doing in order to that leads to that reliance on OTAs? What is that? What do hoteliers stop doing when they rely too much on, the OTAs?
I can only give examples of where I've seen that, and it's where hotels have decided that it's too difficult, too uncomfortable, and perhaps too expensive to try and work the direct channel harder. And typically, that's when they are not very confident about what they're doing, or they're not doing things particularly well, or perhaps the underlying pricing strategy doesn't serve that they're using for the direct channel doesn't serve the customer very well. So often it's when there's a lot of things that are wrong, but typically it then leads the hotel to rely on the marketing and the distribution capabilities of online travel agents, primarily because they do it really well.
Hmm.
And so that's why I sort of mentioned the word lazy, because it's effectively, it's a bit harsh, to be fair, but it
Yeah.
is effectively it's selling out and giving over the entire inventory to a channel that is the owner of the guest at the end of the day.
I often have sort of very heated debates with hoteliers around marketing spend versus OTA commissions, right?
Yeah.
And especially with hoteliers that may spend 5 times more on OTA commissions than what they have as a marketing budget.
Hmm.
And the argument that they make is like, where there's uncertainty with the marketing budget, right? It's just, I don't know necessarily whether it is going to convert into, you know,
Hmm.
accommodations or, bookings, or which, you could argue that's wrong and here's the proof, etc. What do you say to a hotelier that you challenge and say, hey, you should spend more on marketing, but there is a reluctance, or there is, what's help me, in my next conversation with hotelier selfishly.
There's the mathematics of it now. If you look at the
Okay.
level of investment that hoteliers put into commission payments,
Hmm.
and if you then took a percentage of that and put that into the direct channel, um, and grew that direct channel, then that would be a self-serving continuity in investment. The maths of that is relatively straightforward. It's not a difficult sell, but I think what is happening now is that there are better technologies in terms of tracking guest behavior. There's better opportunities in terms of digital marketing to really understand exactly what guests are likely to do, and therefore I think you can get some more efficient results from the digital marketing space than you were able to before. So it's also having the right tech, and I won't be able to kind of like offer you any examples of this because I'm really not in that space, but I do know that working with some of the digital marketing agencies that we work alongside from a client with a client, from a client perspective. There's some extremely good technology nowadays that's able to create lookalike type clients and go after where those guests, so lookalike guests, and go after those guests that behave similarly, and therefore you can actually then start to farm or nurture, a new guest segment. So all of these things nowadays are areas in which hoteliers can explore to really leverage that digital marketing budget and not cap it. It doesn't make sense. If a digital marketing budget is working and you are getting more direct guests, then why cap that budget? It doesn't make sense. And I think it's one of those, it's where the structure of budgeting and the P&L don't stand up, and it don't work in the favor of the digital marketing side of the business. Because if you've got a budget and it says that this is what you spend in digital marketing, then irrespective of how popular that or how successful that budget is, it's challenging to then get more, because budgets are typically set in stone. And I've never had a conversation with a financial controller that says, if this is really successful, can I have some more? There's the Oliver Twist element to this, isn't there? What do you mean more?
Ali, are you making the revolutionary demand that we change how hotels manage their P&L? In a
I
way,
think, yeah, in a
you
way,
are.
I am. No, I think that we need to get to a point where we can pivot if we need to, and I think markets demand that. If we're being successful, then why wouldn't you? And that's not to say that given a solid commercial reasoning, a financial entity would not change their mind. Of course they would, I'm sure. But I do think that budget structures and some of the rules around that are really prohibitive in terms of changing strategy. The clients that are open to change are the ones that are the most exciting, and the ones that they're able to accept failure as well as success. Test and learn being like a real maxim. And those are the ones that typically in the long run are more successful as well.
Interesting. What's one channel that everyone should be participating in, but is currently not on everyone's radar?
If I was looking at distribution overall, I think distribution is becoming significantly more important again, and certainly from the direct channel. If you just combine some of the things we've spoken about, like the improved capabilities of digital marketing, AI search channels, changing guests' behavior patterns, it's all of this will serve you really well in terms of still remaining able to capture the guest at the point of sale.
You're making a case for being in every channel, is I guess what you're saying, right? Like if there is a channel you're not currently present in, get on it. Is that fair?
I would say so, and I can only say from my own experience. But in my experience, the only hotel companies I've worked with who are able to remain consistently out of online travel agencies are those that spend an inordinate amount of money and time and specialist capabilities on the direct channel, like a significant amounts of time and energy and expertise, or they have such a unique product that people want to stay with them, and therefore they don't need to be on online travel agents. And in fact, if anything, will then also claim that it's not necessarily aligned with the brand. So if you look at some of the ultra high net worth individual brands, which is something I've mentioned before, not necessarily actually ultra high net worth, but just unique. And experience led. I'll add that in now because I think experience led opportunities and hotel offerings are really something that people are looking for right now.
Interesting. Before we wrap up, I'm curious if there is something in a hotel room today that you think will disappear in the future.
Oh, crikey. I was going to say telephones, but mostly they have. Although they are reappearing. Would you believe it? So
they're reappearing. You've seen them reappear?
Yeah. I was in one, and it had the other day, and it had one of those old Bakelite telephones. The really old ones.
Okay, that's fun.
With the round thing, that people don't know what you do with them, with the round dial. So yeah, that was interesting. That was a blast from the past. I'm not sure anything about anything else. Dustbins are just so horrible, aren't they? But that's all I can think of. What's wrong with me?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good one. I recently came across a hotelier who said the key will not disappear. Like the physical key
Oh yeah, yeah,
for all the sort of hype around mobile phones and having a digital wallet on your phone. Is like the key is critical, and I hope I will always be key being the key card, right? Not the physical necessarily key,
yeah,
the
yeah.
lock key, but the key card is something that I think most hoteliers will probably stick with for some time.
I think so too. I mean, when I'm working and have and in a hotel with a mobile lock, the level of anxiety that I get, it's just mad. Just walking up to the door, is it going to work? I mean, this is ridiculous. So, and I could do without that. So,
The anxiety I have that my phone runs out of battery is
oh, exactly. That's
enormous.
yeah,
Is
yeah, yeah,
enormous.
yeah, yeah.
Look, the future-looking question that I have for you is when you think of agents making reservations, how soon until an agent will actually replace an OTA in your point of view? Because it's not yet there, right? I mean, there are some
No, no,
versions.
it's not. No, and some agent responses are just, or they're comical, aren't they? They're just like, no, I mean, so
Yeah.
that's not going to work. But I think probably sooner than later, and I think as with anything, it's going to be the first to market type consumers that will drive that, and be willing to accommodate the downsides of the novelty and the innovation that they actually contribute to. So I think it's one of those tech questions, isn't it? Sort of like longer than you think, but sooner than you thought, kind of thing. So
Okay. And who will win the race from your perspective? An
I think
OTA
the
or
oh, travel booking is so complicated that at the moment, at the moment, I think even a lot of AIs have kind of given up on the actual transactional side of
Okay.
it. So I think that in the midterm, the OTAs will win. They'll because they do it really efficiently. So unfortunately, not
Okay.
I don't mean that. Obviously, sorry. Did I say that?
That's okay. That's okay. You can say fortunately, unfortunately. This is a safe space, Ali.
Yeah,
No,
it's only
but
you and
in
me, of course.
exactly, exactly. No, but in all seriousness, I think you have a really valid point, which is travel is not straightforward. It's sometimes
No.
complicated, especially cross border. Payment facilitation is
Yeah,
difficult at
it's
times,
huge.
right?
Yeah,
It's validating that the right customer is actually the person paying. There's an identity validation, so it's
yeah,
not straightforward. It's not You're not ordering a pizza. You're doing a bit more than that.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so you're cautious on who is winning that agentic race at this point. Is that fair?
I am. I think there's probably going to be other players that come in. I think the fintech sector has got a lot of positive plays in this whole environment, um, and they may well kind of make things much easier and therefore destabilize the race at the moment.
There's a question on my list here that I haven't asked you yet, which I really like, and I'd love to close with that,
Okay.
which is, about the younger generation and especially making hospitality attractive again for the
Hmm.
next generation of. So, from your perspective, what needs to change for hospitality to be feel relevant again for a younger, I guess, generation and a younger talent?
I think we need to really revisit the brand identity of hospitality. Um, if you look at any of the advertisements for hospitality, the likelihood is that you'll see a chef or a
Hmm.
housekeeper, and
Hmm.
that is not what hospitality is all about. It is a fundamental part of it, obviously, but you don't see a revenue manager. There's probably a
Hmm.
good reason for that, but you don't.
Hmm.
So I think and you don't get to understand the level of excitement that hospitality industry brings and the opportunities to grow, which you can grow faster in hospitality than you can in any other industry.
Hmm.
I think one of the challenges is also for certainly for Gen Z is that the hours are pretty unsociable if you're actually operational, and that it's just not in their nature to do things that are over difficult. Not my words, but certainly one of the characteristics. And I think you also need to remember that Gen Z's grown up in a lot of uncertainty and is anxious as a generation. And sometimes the hospitality environment, it's a 24-hour show, and that is quite, it can be quite an anxious environment to work in. So there's probably just a sub message of a psychological message regarding hospitality that is, that what they see is people kind of like working very hard, high energy, very a complete, often shifting environment within which you work, which maybe, well, for me, was one of the reasons why I loved getting into hospitality. But for some people, it's just not what they want. They want stability. They want something that they know is going to be the same the next day. So there's a lot of things that we could do to change what people think of us. But I think the brand of hospitality is something we need to look at quite carefully, and how we position all of the different roles.
Ali, thank you for joining today this program and sharing your insights, your expertise, and your experience in this matter. This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to avoid missing the next episode. It helps us produce better shows and get the most interesting guests. Thank you for your support.